But race seems to now pervade so many areas of society. And breaking right now, the Mrs. Brown's Boys race storm has grown. So we spoke about this earlier in the week, but this is about Brendan O'Carroll, who is the star of Mrs. Brown's Boys, making a joke at a cast read through. So it wasn't in front of any members of the public or anything like that, but at a cast read through where he used an implied racist term. Now, this is really interesting to me because they're not saying the Daily Mirror that he used the N word. They're saying he made a joke which in some way implied the N word. Now, what's happened is that the BBC have issued Brendan O'Carroll with a final warning after a black crew member quit in outrage over the joke. So this raises so many issues for me, Dr. Alka, because first you have the issue of comedy, right? Comedy is meant to be offensive, and I totally sign up to the Ricky Gervais view of the world, which is that just because you're offended about something in a comics act, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're right, because the whole point of comedy is to shock and horrify. But in this case, what's interesting to me is he didn't use the word. They say he implied the use of the word.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you make of it?
This is, I think you have to bear in mind, this is coming very shortly after we've seen the teacher Mariah Hassan being cleared in court for using racial slurs and on the
Yes.
placard on the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel demonstrations, and that was because she was a teacher, she was voicing the right opinions, and in the right opinions justified as satire or irony, or one academic, one race grifter, in my view, academic, tried to call it, sort of political critique. I mean, that's really a low bar for political critique. But, that was justified. Calling Suella Braverman, having pictures of Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak with coconuts there is like, okay, that's not a racial slur. And this is, and I mean, the thing is, rather than get into wasn't it, it was, in both cases they are racial slurs. The answer to me is not to kind of be going down a rabbit hole of who can say it, where and when, who has the right to say it, because then you're just policing speech. It just should be free. I think, to be honest, I think we should all we need to get to a point where we accept we can have the right to offend and we have the right to be offended. But that right does not mean that it doesn't give you kind of any claim on organizational authority or setting the rules within something like the BBC. And yes, you can say something, you're offended by something. Personally, I love Mrs. Brown. I mean, my family don't. They look at me aghast, but I really like.
Well, it's the thing is, it's one of the BBC's only working class comedies. And so what's so interesting is actually there's a feeling at the BBC, Dr. Alka, that they're very embarrassed about Mrs. Brown's Boys. It's not the type of posh comedy that they like to watch. They like things like Fleabag, the thing that Phoebe Waller-Bridge did, which, don't get me wrong, was really good, but quite grotesque and, very woke. They like that, whereas they view a comedy like Mrs. Brown's Boys that appeals to the masses as embarrassing in some way, which I absolutely don't think it is. But I do wonder if there is a bit of a move at the BBC to try and get Brendan O'Carroll cancelled.
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I think you're absolutely right about the kind of nervousness and squeamishness that the clerisy, and I'd include the kind of leading people at the BBC in that, feel about, everyday life, ordinary people, the way we speak, the way the way we eat, the way we bring up our children. All of that is kind of, you can see we've had quite a few years of that trying to be kind of managed and nudged in the right direction so that we become more like the cliques of the middle class think we should be, which is the opposite of a kind of democratic, open, free, and tolerant society. So even though you can think, well, taken in isolation, these little things, you think, oh, it's just one comedian or it's just one show, but it is. You can see a kind of accumulation of things happening at a kind of cultural and under the surface kind of moral judgment. There's a kind of process of moral stigmatization going on here. I mean, as it happens, I like Fleabag as well, but I love Brendan Carroll. And, I could watch, you should watch a comedy. And okay, if you can be offended,
Yes.
had he not implied the N word, had he implied the P word, I might think, oh no, that's horrible. It can be painful. It can. I'm not saying it would be, but
Yes.
it can be, right? Things like that can be
Yes.
upsetting. Um, but
Yeah, but
but the thing is that it's not, we can't run society according to how we feel as individuals. You have to think, what is the
totally.
best for the overall? What is best for all of us? And it's not going to be best for all of us if we just say we're going to try and measure offence, because offence is subjective. You can't organise everybody around that kind of principle. So you think, okay, offence is the price we pay for being in a democracy, for being in a free culture. I don't think we can accept anything less.
And it is so interesting when you think about the fact that actually the BBC tends to be uber woke when it comes to issues like this. But obviously, they have a track record that involves people like Hugh Edwards and Jimmy Savile. So it's all quite ironic. But look, Dr. Alka, don't go anywhere. Stand by, because in just 1 minute, I want to talk to you about the reparations debate. This has obviously exploded thanks to King Charles's forthcoming trip to Australia and a certain meeting with the Prime Minister of Barbados. So don't go anywhere. But first, it is the best time of year, right, guys? Football is back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US, NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups, where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you the hero or the guy on the bench that everyone ridicules in the group chat. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench, because let's be honest, no one wants to fumble their grooming routine. So this is where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue ear and nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will make you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster with precise trimming capabilities. It's efficient, reliable, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. Now, no one wants a surprise nose or ear hair making a guest appearance on game day, do they? So the Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming game. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra also comes with 2 free gifts today: the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag, premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. That's www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken and you'll get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So 20% off and free shipping if you enter Outspoken as the code at checkout at manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. But now back to the show, and I'm rejoined by Dr. Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert of Don't Divide Us in our uncancelled interview. And breaking right now, King Charles is facing growing pressure to pay up to £19 trillion in reparations. This is, of course, a discussion that he opened up himself just a couple of years ago, saying the time to talk about slavery has come. So what's he going to say when the Prime Minister of Barbados demands that amount of money? Well, what he should say is exactly what Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, says is his position on reparations.
Not a single penny in reparations. Because, look, the reality is, frankly, lots of other countries owe us.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the Royal Navy and the British taxpayer that stopped the slave trade over many years, about 170, 200 years ago, and we should be we should be thanked for that. Not then said you've got to pay a bill. And there were vast legions of people along the way who made money out of the vile slave trade, including tribal leaders and rulers and kings in African countries. So let's just stop.
So, Dr. Alka, where do you stand on the reparations debate?
Well, I would agree that we should not be talking about reparations. And I have to say, much to my surprise, credit where it's due, Keir Starmer has said no, we will not be paying reparations. I just hope that he stands up to that when he's under pressure from David Lammy and academics and the Church of England Commission, who are also wanting to pay reparations. So there is a lot of pressure from the great and the good for Britain to be doing this. And that is part of the wider cultural self-loathing that's going on, the kind of attempt, this idea that nothing about Britain can be free from the taint of a past sin. It's not really even about the past. It's certainly not about reality today or trying to help developing countries that might be struggling. So, for example, there are about 6 or 7 countries in the CARICOM Reparations Trust, the Caribbean organisation that's putting forward these demands. We've got a country like Barbados, whose GDP per capita in 2023, I just looked up some figures here, is $22,672. This is, I think, according to World Bank data. So that's kind of at the highest end, right? But then you've also got in that group, by the way, Barbados got its independence in 1966. You take a country like Haiti, which is also in that group, which got its independence in 1804, and its GDP per capita is 1,693. So there's a huge difference there. And you would have thought that if you were concerned about trying to improve the lives of people who need it, who are in countries where development, for whatever reasons, is less than it should be in order to provide a decent life for people, then you kind of ought to be looking at things happening today, at trade deals, at the way global corporations work somehow, often to the detriment of weaker, smaller countries. Those are the kinds of issues you could be looking at. But no, instead we've got this blanket condemnation, this absurd statement from CARICOM that says it is illogical, because on the one hand, Britain is meant to have been kind of on a genocidal spree to get rid, to kill everybody, all indigenous peoples and slaves. But that would be like the slave owners destroying their property, right? They wanted slaves, so they wouldn't kill them because they wanted them to work, right? So that's an absurdity for a start. I mean, it has no logical credibility. The only reason I don't know why they're doing this, whether they've kind of, they have their own internal problems, maybe modernity, maybe independence hasn't worked out for them in the way they hoped it would. But this is not the way for them to solve their problems. And this is certainly not something Britain should be agreeing to, either not just practically not giving them the money, but we need to be, far more confident in standing up and saying, look, I'm sorry, slavery, colonialism, that was just one, in terms of history, you think of how far back history goes, that was a very small part of it, right? And as Richard Tye says, and his other historians say, much effort and money was put in. Britain stood alone. It was the first country. Loads of other people still thought slavery was okay. There was a fight in Britain, right? It wasn't just easy. They didn't just wake up one day, oh, yeah, well, okay, we'll get rid of slavery. People here had to argue for it, fight for it. People saved, ordinary working class people in the north of England saved money to buy the freedom of Frederick Douglass when he was over here from America, right? So this is just a complete attempt to morally stigmatize what Britain is today, right? And it's a very disempowering, cruel, emotionally and morally and cruel thing to do, and politically very dangerous, because it will just fuse a kind of fractious grievance, lack of solidarity that we're already seeing in our society. So no, reparations, no.
Very, very well put. absolutely loved having you. That is
Thank you.
Dr. Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert, who is the director of Don't Divide Us. And I hope you come back to Outspoken soon, Dr. Alka.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.